In the first reading, the prophet promised us a new and everlasting covenant, which is the thing that ever since the fall in the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve and all of the Old Testament had been waiting for. Time after time, God had offered covenants to the people of Israel. Time after time, they failed, or I should say we failed. And yet there was this longing to enter into a covenant of a different kind of a life. To enter into a covenant with God where He would dwell in the human heart, and we, in a sense, would dwell in Him. The prophets didn't know what that was going to look like, how it was going to come about. It wasn't until Christ Himself came and worked that new covenant out that we understood the implications. From the moment of Jesus' crucifixion onward, we would become members of His mystical body. We would live in Him, and He would live in us through grace. And that's kind of the itinerary we've been following for the men who are doing the spiritual exercises this weekend. Going back to the very beginnings in the Garden of Eden and those longings of the human heart, the way that God made us in the beginning in absolute harmony and unity with Him, and that ongoing desire that's in the very core of our being to return to that state. But I think to our surprise, we read the gospel and Jesus tells us something that you don't always want to hear. This covenant is going to involve falling into the ground and dying. This is the path that Christ chose for Himself, but as members of His mystical body, it means that if you and I want to have life also, if you and I want to live life to the full, to have an abundant life, it's going to imply that regularly we also need to fall into the ground and to die. And it's going to be a death to ourselves, a death to the old man, a death to all the things that tend to drag us down, and frequently a death to the criteria of the world around us, the ambiance in which we live. Death to all that in order to enter into freedom. Freedom to be able to say yes to the grace of God when it doesn't come easily. And I think all of you, again, who have done this retreat, we've gone through that journey. There have been moments, I'm sure, of dryness. There have been moments of boredom. There have been moments of... this time you don't get to complain about the cold, by the way. Compliments to the rector and vice rector of Cheshire. They have heard your cries in the desert, and they had mercy on you, and they made sure that the heat was running. And the prayers of the faithful brothers brought in sunshine and warm weather. So one less thing for you to worry about, right? I think somebody was running a chainsaw in the dormitory. That may be another another cross that you had to bear that I can't do anything about. The man responsible for fixing the bedrooms is back there, and as I've told him several times, if you don't like it, you could have got your guys to work faster, so there you go. Next year, you'll have glorious refurbished bedrooms, at least some of you, at least the snorers, okay? So if you want a room and not a cubicle, just let us all know that you snore loudly, and we'll make sure that you are properly isolated, okay? But through all these deaths that we have encountered during the weekend, I think all of us have also experienced what is the end result. You're leaving here and we are full of peace. We have had an encounter with the living God, and each one of you in your own way, I think, can say, you know what, I'm so glad I came. Some of you actually drove 5.5 hours from Washington, D.C. or from Philadelphia. Other people drove from Boston. Other people drove all the way from down in the Naugatuck Valley. Right? But each one of you had your own pilgrimage to make in order to be here. And in this desert experience that we talked a lot about on Thursday, for those of you who are here, we've encountered Christ, and we've kind of gone through that path of purification and come out the other side with the peace of Christ in our hearts. What are we going to have to do to make this retreat stick? That's always the tough part, right? A good retreat is really great for about 3 days if you don't walk away with a game plan. You're going to go home, and your work is still going to be your work. Your kids are still going to be your kids. Your wife is still going to be your wife. You are still going to be you, which is probably the worst thing you have to deal with. Everything else you could probably deal with in life. Actually, I remember one brother telling me in all earnestness, I think I could deal with everybody else in the community. It's just me I can't handle. So what are we going to do about it? Okay? And this is where your program of life comes in. If you haven't finished your program of life, especially if it's your first 1 or 2 or 3 programs, okay, my cordial recommendation, before too much more time passes, tonight, if possible, finish it up. Your program doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even particularly have to be that good, okay? It is better for you to work on a bad program that's not even necessarily focused on the right virtue than not to work on anything. Because I guarantee, no matter what the virtue you're working on, you need it, okay? It's just true. We all have all of the 7 deadly sins in us. They're all in there. So even if you shoot in the wrong direction, as long as you are working, I guarantee you will make some progress. Okay? So, before you go to bed, polish up your program of life, okay? Because starting tomorrow morning, that's going to be your instrument. That's going to be what you take away and go to war with. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, I hope it isn't. I don't care if your program has a motto along the lines of "Go for it, dude." If "Go for it, dude" motivates you, and that's enough, and you know what it means to you, and that's going to help you when you wake up to live your spiritual life, then do it. And if your program of life has 3 or 4 points, but you're actually going to do them, and they're somewhat relevant and realistic and practical, then it's a good program. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not talking to you, brothers. You've got a totally different set of... You've got spiritual... You have nothing else to do with your lives than to figure this stuff out. I'm holding you to a higher level, okay? The guys who are out back there who have to work for a living, they've got other things to do aside from, their program of life and their spiritual direction every week like you guys get, and, daily adoration and all the good stuff that you have going for you. So that's going to be my first recommendation is get your program of life and just take something and work on it systematically. Simple, complicated, whatever. If you are working on it every day, baby steps, I guarantee when you come back next year, you will be in a better place. Number 2, like we said, iron sharpens iron. If you're an RC member, live your RC life. Hang out with the men who are going to influence you, who are going to be a positive influence, who are going to motivate you and encourage you and hold you accountable and all that. If you're not an RC member, hurry up and join. No, if you're not an RC member, then who are those good friends that you have? There are other men's groups out there, by the way, and they're all really, a lot of them are quite good. So maybe RC isn't your cup of tea, that's fine. If there are other good men's groups out there, look into them. And if not, find those couple of people that can hold you accountable. Because when you're out there, if we try to go it alone, I guarantee sooner or later we're going to get dragged down. Okay? And that's it. We're going to leave the homily. We're going to keep it relatively short. I know you're hungry, and I know you don't want to hear me preach anymore. You've heard me enough. So those are my 2 recommendations. If we want to make this retreat last, if we want it to stick, if we want to carry it with us and have it actually mean something, then my recommendation is finish your program of life, work on your program of life, be it ever so simple, and find good men that you can lean on that are going to help you live in your life of faith. If you do those simple things, you may not become perfect or a canonized saint next year, but you'll be on the way.